Here we go. Well, good day, everyone, and welcome back to my channel. And the next episode in my series of healing ourselves by sharing our stories. And my fabulous guest today is a lovely lady I met a couple of weeks ago on a campfire project roundtable where we were discussing natural remedies to recover from depression. And I was just blown away by her energy. You know, this lady is amazing. And also her connection she has with the people in the beyond. And a few years ago, I would have poo-hooed that, but with my own experience in connecting with my mother who is in the beyond, now I'm just blown away by what I don't know, So what I'm asking Marie to do today is just to tell her story in her own way. And my particular area of interest is like the first 7 or 10 years of my life, which is when I suffered all my trauma. I had a very, very violent upbringing, but and how I overcame that. But Marie, I just, like I do when I go on stage, you know, I never write a song list. I've been winging it for 58 years on stage. So please, Marie, share whatever you want, share your story. And to the listeners, there will be links to all of Marie's material and how you can contact her in the show's description. So take it away, Marie, and the floor is yours. You have the talking stick.
Thank you. I'll grab that. Thank you so much, Bob, for having me. I really appreciate the conversation, the connection that we have here. Where's my talking stick? I had one before. Anyway, the first 7 years of your life, you know, that's a really interesting point, because I actually had a rather interesting upbringing. And I very rarely share this, actually, because most people are always interested in the thereafter and what I'm doing with the story that I'm about to share as well. But I will start with the first 7 years of my life, because they really were a breeding ground for resilience. Let me put it that way. And that's the most positive way I can put it. So people often ask me, because I'm one of 5, they're like, oh, what number are you? And I always confuse them with my answer, because I say I'm either number 1, number 5, or number 4, depending on how you see it. And they were like, what? And I'm like, well, so my siblings are all adopted. So in terms of order, how we came into the family, my second oldest brother was adopted first, then my 2 sisters. So he was 4. The year after, my 2 sisters came with 3 and 1. And then when they were just adopted into our family, my mom found out she was pregnant with me. So I was born 9 months after. You do the maths, and there is 16 months between my older sister and me. Naturally, you know, due to the nature of how we came into the family, there was a lot of rivalry between my sister and me, because she was finally come into a family. She had finally come into a family where there was a lot of love, and she was, you know, really welcomed into the family. And then along I come, you know, and sort of push her off her throne again, because now I'm the firstborn into the family, you know. So here's my number 1 that I wasn't aware of until my 30s, actually, when a shaman told me, you know, why does that surprise you that all your siblings come to you for advice? You're the first one in the family. And I was like, I never thought about that. I never thought about it. I was so brought up that, you know, our siblings are my siblings, and there is no difference between being born or adopted into the family. But there is. You can't negate that. There is a difference. And then my eldest brother came into the family when I was about 2, and he was 11. And that brought a lot of violence into the family, because he came from a home where he was the victim, where he was probably molested and treated like really badly. And he brought all that violence into our family, because he now was the oldest. You know, he now was put on top of the rank, from the bottom of the rank on top of the rank, and passed on a lot of violence that he did not know what to do with. So decades and decades of therapy later, I realized how important all of that was for me in terms of resilience. You know, I was 20 when my dad passed away, which hit me like rock bottom. I had no tools how to cope with that, how to deal with that. I was very close to my dad, and literally fell apart for a few years emotionally. I was a wreck. I didn't know how to cope with his passing because society doesn't really teach you how to deal with grief.
Mhm.
Then in my early 30s, I decided to move to Australia and live my fairy tale life. And I did. There were a lot of choices that supported that. There were a lot of
Okay.
choices
Okay.
pro me. And I'm going to pause there because I can only imagine you've got a billion questions.
No, I just got one question. When you think back to your childhood,
Yeah.
did you feel safe during your?
No,
Yeah,
never.
yeah,
Mm-mm. It was one of the biggest things, that
yeah,
not feeling safe.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
my experience at that time was I was living that whole period. My modus operandi was fight or flight because I didn't know we was going to get exposed to
Yeah.
violence again.
Mm.
And the way I look at it is, spiritually, I was born into this existence as a wonderful, magical little child where the world's a beautiful and fantastic place.
Mm.
But by the time I was 7 or 8, I was Robert the robot. So yeah,
Mm.
that's all I'll say on that. But yeah, I could sense the connection there that that your childhood was fear-based and ditto.
Yeah.
And I believe
It was definitely, there was a lot of survival. I was in survival mode for a really long time in my life. So I subconsciously, mostly, learned that survival is the norm. That's just how life is. And I learned a very different life once I moved to Australia. So that was really, for me, that was such a turning point in my life, moving to Australia, because I chose what I had in my heart, what I wanted. And the bonus on top of that is it was the furthest away from my family that I could possibly be. So I was born in Austria, then I moved to Australia just before I turned 32, actually. So interestingly enough, that shaman lady that I mentioned at the beginning, that sat with me and said, brought my attention to this whole, well, you're the first one in the family. And I was like, wow, of course, I never thought about this. She also said to me that there is this cycle from a shaman perspective between 30 and 33 where there's huge change and transition going on before you settle into where you need to be. And that was exactly the time where I was moving to Australia, where I left everything I knew, life as I knew it, my friends and family, everyone behind, to start a new life in Australia. And at the age of 33, where she said everything will settle. And back then I was just 30 and I thought, oh my God, another 3 years of turmoil, I just can't handle anymore. I just thought, don't give me that. But she was right. And then I moved to Australia. 10 months later, I met Rob. And another 10 months later, we were married. And that was when we were 33. So at the age of 33, I got married to the love of my life and really lived that fairy tale wedding and dream life. We had our barefoot wedding at the beach, a shaman wedding, just like we both had. Really always dreamt about that barefoot wedding at the beach. That was something that we had both dreamt about and didn't know of each other till we talked about it. And we were both like, oh my God, So
I've got another
and
question.
then, yeah, sure.
Sorry. I love the way you're flowing with
don't
this.
be.
It's really good. So going back to the childhood years, and I won't keep going back, but for me, the messages that I learned from my childhood was that mum is always beating me, therefore she does not love me, therefore I'm unlovable and it's all my fault. And then the second message was, and the world's a dangerous place because I'm always getting beaten. And then the message I got from Dad was, Dad never spends any time with me, therefore he does not love me, therefore I'm unlovable and it's all my fault. So those were the messages that I internalized, and my healing wasn't complete until I was able to forgive my abusers, my parents. And that's another story, and you've got my story anyway, so I won't reiterate it here. So yeah. So what sort of messages did you get from, like, who was
I
your
had,
primary
yeah,
user?
I had none of these messages for me because I knew, I knew deep inside, and I knew that my parents, both my mum and my dad, really, really loved me. And I felt that, and I knew that, and they, made sure that I knew that. So there was that, but there was also the when I do. My biggest message from my childhood was when I stand out, and I always did. I was born like that. I was always born like. Um, my husband often said that to me. He said, "You're a natural born leader, Marie." And I thought, well, you say that because you love me. I didn't. But somewhere deep inside of me, I knew that he was right. But I had never learned to actually own it and to stand in that light and to, until shortly after, actually, my boss said it to me. I was working in advertising for a good decade. And he said to me the exact same words, Martin. I still remember. He was such a great mentor. He said to me, "Marie, you're a natural born leader." I got, I think, 3 promotions and 3 pay rises within 2 years of working there, and he said that to me. So you're a natural born leader. People just really are drawn working with you. They love working with you. And when he said it, I thought, hold on, what's his benefit of telling me? There must be something, that I really need to own this. But I never did, because for me, the message that I received from my childhood, coming back to your question, was when you stand out, you get the hate and the jealousy of your siblings. That's what, in particular, my younger sister, she's the one that was only 60 months older than me. There was real jealousy. And I understand that now. Like I really have got nothing but love for her in my heart now, and for all of my siblings, for everything that happened in our family, the violence, the beating, you name it. It went way deeper and way further. But out of protection for my siblings, I'm not going to go into too much detail because this is my story and I don't need to open that for their stories. So, but there was a lot of violence and abuse in the family, and I now look at them, and luckily that started early on in my mid-late 20s when I went through a lot of therapy after my dad passed away. All that stuff came up, all that not feeling safe, all that jealousy, all the hate, all the, well, who am I actually? Who am I? Who am I supposed to be in this world? So a lot of work around that for a good 10 years with different therapies that I've been to. And that was the one message from my childhood that I still to the day, every now and then it knocks on the door to make sure that I'm looking at it, that I'm letting go of it. It's an ongoing healing journey with that. With every time I level up in my life, I level up in my business, that story comes back to check, are you sure that you're born for that? Are you sure that you're owning this now? And then I go through another level of healing that and allowing that in. It is really a conscious process every time I level up to look at it again. So I'm not saying here saying like I never healed that. I'm saying that certain things, when you level up or when you experience adversity, come back to check in on you, where you're at with that. And I have to say, in adversity, our childhood stuff always comes back up. So interestingly enough, what you asked me, what was your message? The I'm not safe. That was the first thing I used as an example when Rob passed away. So here to finish off my story, Rob passed away when we were 45. Completely unexpected. He was away on a business trip and never came home. He had a brain aneurysm in the shower in a hotel where he was standing, and that was it. Literally unplugged from our lives. That's the exact vision I had. That's exactly how it happened. That's when I called the hotel and said to them, "Can you please check in the shower?" Because I had a split second of a vision of him collapsing in a shower, and I shook my head. I still remember I shook my head for him, like, "Don't go there, Marie. What are you doing? Don't drive yourself crazy." But when I rang the hotel and said, "My husband's staying with you, can you please check?" Because I haven't heard from him. I actually added it. I said, "And can you please check in the shower?" I thought they must think I'm nuts, but that's exactly where they found him.
Yeah, that's an amazing connection. And must have been such a hard time for you. But I was blown away at our panel discussion by his presence in that conversation. you know, raising the hand, and
Yes.
that for me was
I'm going
magic.
to explain it quickly because people will not know what you're referring to. So about 3.5, 4 months ago now, my father-in-law passed away. So this was the third significant father figure in my life that died. You know, first my dad when I was 20, then Rob, you know, father of our kids, obviously. We've got 2 beautiful sons, when he was 45. And then now, like a few months ago, my father-in-law passed away. And I was there in the room with him when he passed. You know, I held him, I was there. The whole family came together, so we were all there. He was surrounded by love when he passed, which is so beautiful. You know, that's what he wanted. But 3 days before Otavio passed, Rob started showing up more significantly and more obvious than ever before. I always got signs from him since he passed, you know, and it was mostly in terms of numbers, etc. But all of a sudden, about 2 or 3 days before Otavio passed, he started showing up in my Zoom meetings. And, you know, when you have that button where you can put hand raiser or thumbs up, it would appear on my screen like a circle, like if it was loading, and then it would disappear again. So only I could see it, but every now and then it loads full circle and then it stays on screen. And I'm sometimes here talking with my hands and then all of a sudden it appears and people go like, how did you press that button? And I'm like, it's not me, it's my husband butting into my conversation, you know. I talk about it now, but it's really not one Zoom. Well, it was probably, so just to put that into context, I have about 2 to 3 Zoom meetings a day in a normal day, you know. And over the last 4 months, so you can do the math, how many Zoom meetings there were maybe 2 or 3 where he didn't show up, where I was like, were you busy? What's going on? You know, but in every other Zoom meeting, I would get the thumbs up, the hand raising. I'm like, come on, send me a love heart, just once, a love heart. Never got that so far, but I get the hand raising and the thumbs up, and mostly it's the thumbs up. So, but the beautiful thing is that it comes up not randomly, it comes up when I talk about something where I'm like, okay, here I've got Rob's thumbs up. You know what I mean? It's just perfect timing as well. It's not just random that it shows up. So I thought this is really interesting. But come to terms with it this is just how it is, you know. Rob shows up in my Zoom meetings and I love it.
Well, he's more than welcome to show up today. Get on you, Rob.
I'm like, yeah. It's like performance pressure. Oh, I love it.
No pressure here. Yeah. What I love the word you said about resilience, and like, just because my parents were absent, I became self-reliant at a very early age. Like I could dye my own socks when I was 7. By the time I was 7, I could cook for myself. Mum was still in that German war mindset of scarcity. And when I was 11, I had 3 jobs because I never got any pocket money, but you know, I just got 3 little jobs. And although my childhood was painful, for me, I look at it as, well, every step I've ever taken, however painful, has brought me here to contentment. You know, and healing the wounds of my childhood was the most powerful work I've ever done. It was like somebody had taken an elephant off my shoulders. But the biggest, and I love it when you said you came to Australia and you knew that that's in your heart, that's what you had to do. And that was the same with me and my family in '89. And I stayed and they went back, but I knew in my heart of hearts that Australia is my heartland, and I do not own a pair of shoes, you know.
Same.
So, yeah. So we have a lot.
I always knew that this was where I was supposed to be.
Yeah.
I had this calling since I was about probably 17. It was always that you have to go to Australia. I never knew why. I had never seen a documentary about Australia. I knew nothing about it. You know, I even thought Sydney was the capital. That's how little I knew about Australia. I had no idea. I didn't know why. And yet I had this really strong longing that I need to go there. And not just visit, I need to go there and be there and live there. I could never explain it. And then in '97, I did come here for the first time ever. I just had to look. There's this huge butterfly that just came past my window. I love it. And when I landed here in Sydney, that was in October, 11th of October, 97. I still remember the date. It felt like coming home after ages. I've never had this strong feeling of home anywhere else in the world, because we moved so much in my childhood. You know, when I came to Australia to finally live here, it was my 17th move. So I never had these roots. You know, you say roots is where your heart is and where you belong, but I felt my heart was in Australia without being able to explain that, because I didn't know anyone here.
Yeah.
But when I came here, I was like, this is finally home. I was so, and when I had to go back like 4 or 5 months later, I actually booked to stay here for a few months, you know, and then when I had to go back to Austria, I cried almost the entire time on the way back. I just cried on the plane, and I just had to convince myself I'm just on a business trip to organize my visa so I can come back, you know. But it took me 7 more years before I could actually do that. 7 years, and all up 12 flights in between those 7 years. And the 12th flight was for good. That was a one-way ticket.
Well, what shed light for me on my connection with this great southern land was a few years ago. I had a session with somebody, can't remember her name now, Debbie Solaris maybe, doing past life regression. And my previous existence on this planet was I was a tribal elder in the Northern Territory. So I'd already been here before. And just for anybody that's listening, everybody in Australia knows that Brisbane is the capital of Australia.
Don't listen to Bob.
Oh dear.
I love it.
Yeah. Okay, you'll go.
No, it's fine. I don't even know where we take this story from here, but it was such a beautiful coming home and knowing that this is where I'm supposed to be, and then finally moving here, you know, getting my first own apartment, because I obviously always lived with people that I then got to know over the years, and always the same beautiful people, you know, Steph and Franny. Hi, if you're listening to this, we're always my flatmates, and I always stayed with friends that I knew very well. And then eventually got my first home place in Coogee. I still remember that. It was really beautiful. It was the most beautiful address I've ever had in my entire life through all these moves. I lived on a corner of Dolphin Street and Melody Lane, 3 blocks away from the beach. It was absolutely picture perfect, you know, absolute dream life. And this is when I met Rob. And this is where he moved in with me in that beautiful address. And yeah, that's where we started our dream life together. And as I said, you know, the barefoot wedding, 2 boys, a house later, and we lived our dream life. Everybody just, you know, we were that couple for everyone. Everybody's like, oh, Marie and Rob, and look at you guys, you know, you're so still madly in love after all these years of marriage. Like, we had 12 years of marriage together, you know, but I felt it was a continuous falling in love with Rob. People always say, oh, if you tell me that you don't have fights, you're lying. And I'm like, well, we never really did. We maybe had the odd argument about something, but it was so mundane that I can't even remember. We never had major arguments. Do you know what I mean? It was just, there was so much love and trust and connection. We talked about things, you know, and I think that was the number one thing that kept our relationship alive and beautiful and pure, because we talked about things as they came up, or sometimes even before they came up. So I really cannot remember one major argument that Rob and I had. So those relationships do exist. I'm not just, you know, painting it nicer now because Rob has passed. It really was like that. And I really honor that we put that work and that love into our relationship. And I believe that is a gift that I received through my dad's passing, you know, to never let anything unsaid when you love someone. That's my hidden gift in adversity that I learned the hard way when I was 20, and I lived that, and luckily Rob did too, so I was very lucky with that.
Yeah, well, as a corollary to that, I've got an amazing intellect, and that's where I lived in Headspace for probably the first 45 years of my life. But when my wife and I met, it was like I'm living the magazine life, and this it just felt the right thing to do, because I didn't know what love was. So we had 12 years together of just being nice to each other, but never sharing our what was in our hearts. And so, you know, if Pam said something that pissed me off, I'd just swallow it. And you know, and she did the same. So it although it was really painful when we parted, I realized that our whole marriage was just a sham. It was just reality TV, which is the biggest oxymoron on the planet, isn't it? Reality TV. So I'm looking forward to having a similar relationship as you have with Rob.
Yeah.
What you're sharing is just so beautiful. Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
I've got tears in my eyes, darling. Thank you. Thank you so much.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, it all comes. Look, I've got 3 words in the beacons of my life. The first one is integrity. And you can put that wall in big golden letters about a foot high, because without personal integrity, this magic could never have happened. Because if I can lie to myself, I can lie to anybody. And then the second one was KISS, the KISS principle. Keep it simple, sovereign. And I changed that because I know now, where I am now, that the words I use create my reality. And then the third one was something I first articulated about 12 years ago, which is the Sue principle. We're all sovereign, unique, and equal. So yeah, that's where I'm coming from. And I just got a warning that we got about 9.5 minutes to go before the end of this session. But so just let me know if you want to do a part 2, and I'd love to. You know, just to. For me, these things had a natural life of their own. It's all of a sudden you realise, okay, you know, that's enough for today. But I'm looking forward to part 2. Oh dear. This is strange for me. It's like I'm almost lost for words. I think the biggest turning point came in my life when I was talking about loving life after grief. What I was grieving for was the loss of me, the loss of my belief in myself, which eventuated in 20 years plus of depression and avoiding my feelings through medication. And so I spent 20 odd years grieving that, but I didn't know it until my body slapped me in November 1984 with my first panic attack. And that really was the beginning of my recovery, although I didn't realize it for 20 years. I was a slow learner. But the biggest step was, it's about 2015, I was on the boat and I just threw my meds away, and I'd just become a ship's captain. And it's like, oh, bugger, Bob, you're responsible for the lives of all these people, even the vibe. So I just took that ideology and applied it to my life. I became master and commander of my life, and I do take full responsibility for this life that I do create. And that was the absolute major turning point. Oh dear.
I had this very similar moment, probably with a very different background, because I came from heavily in love, beautiful marriage to whack, Rob was gone, and within an instant, and I sat there literally in our bedroom on the floor, and it felt like the music had stopped, and I knew that the boys were sitting downstairs on the couch, and they were waiting in their uniform, waiting for me to take them to martial arts training. And instead I had to go down and tell them about their dad's passing, and I knew in that instant, there was this moment of, I will do anything I have in my mind, in my power, in my heart, to create the happiest life possible for those two. and myself, of course, But this is what Rob and I, we were lucky enough that we had some of those conversations that were triggered, by him driving past a fatal accident or something like that. And we were lucky enough to have these conversations. What would you do if, And of course, there was theory back then. None of us thought that would truly happen in our life. But the essence of those conversations always ended up in either of us saying, I would want you to take the boys and create the happiest life possible. Because that's what love is. Love is simple. Love just wants you to be happy. And that's what we wanted for each other. And in that moment, when I had to walk downstairs and tell the boys, and they were falling apart and they were crying and screaming and we were hugging, that's when it hit me. That's the moment of truth. That's where I'm supposed to step up and create the happy life for them. I had no idea how in that moment, but that became my North Star. That became my soul direction. That became my go-to. I knew that whatever decision I had to make, the tiniest ones and the big ones, all had to be based on, is that going to make our life happy or not? Despite what anybody else would say around us. So much so that about 4 months into it, I had really started to notice how people looked at me, and I realized how I was handling grief so differently. And most people just didn't understand what was going on in my life and what I was doing with that. And some even thought I wasn't grieving properly and all that stuff, but that was stuff and that was their thoughts. It was no reflection of what was going on in my heart. And in my heart, I knew that I was on the right path because Rob gave me signs left, right, and center that I was on the right path and that he was so freaking happy with what I was doing. And was it easy? No, not at all. But it was simple. It was a simple decision every single day. And about 4 months into it, I actually wrote a book about that. And that was what planted the seed that I later on turned into a movement. And the title of the book and now movement is Loving Life After Loss. And that's where I shared the story, how Rob and I met, how we fell in love, how we had our dream wedding, the 2 boys, the house, the everything, till his passing, and then how I dealt with it. And I wrote the book in the hope that maybe some people would get some direction out of that, some idea how you can actually shift your perspective. But also for the boys, I thought, this is a beautiful love legacy for Rob. One day they might be able to read that, What I didn't expect was that the book not only became a #1 bestseller on Amazon, but it ranked in the top 100 of Australia. And that's when I realized I've got something that the world needs. The world needs hope and happiness and healing in the time where you least expect it, but you need it the most, and nobody offers you that, or hardly anyone in the space of grief. And I actually traveled around the world with the boys for 2 months. And when I came back, so, Rob passed. 4 months later, I started writing the book. Another month later, I published it. Then we traveled around the world for 2 months. And when I came back, I started the movement. So I opened the doors to Loving Life After Loss 9 months after Rob died. I had no idea how and what, but I was so guided. I knew I had to do that. Every step of the way, I was just guided and further. And there was this upward spiral of post-traumatic growth and healing. And whatever I healed and whatever I learned, I shared and taught other people. And that's how it became this amazing journey. And, I started creating healing journeys and programs and retreats. And the retreats have become my absolute hard work. And this is really, straight from my heart to everybody else who comes. It's that heart to heart that happens at the retreats. And that's where the deepest transformation and connection and healing happens. And that's my sole focus for 2023, to bring more people into these retreats. And I already have 2 extra facilitators that will do it with me. So I love it. I absolutely love this work. And I actually wrote a follow-up story after that book that only came out at the beginning of this year, and it's called Happy Healing. And that's where I actually share the steps, how the journey continued, and actual steps through the grief, how you come from grief to relief. That's what I called it. And this is where I finish off my story. I also did a TEDx talk on redefining our image of a widow, because I'm not a huge fan of labels. And when you look at me now, I'm probably not your typical widow that you think of when you think of a widow. So I wanted to do something around changing that perspective, changing our labels and our language in grief. It's a huge thing. our language, as you said, becomes our reality, and I am here to change that. So that's me in a nutshell.
Okay, so if we take a short break now, when we come back, I would like to share with you what my mission is and ask you the same question. So I'll
Perfect. Let's do it.
Yeah, I'll close this meeting now because there's a minute to go, and then restart it straight away. Okay. See you on the flip side, darling.
Cool. See ya.
I'm glad somebody's.
Welcome back.
Yeah, and welcome front.
I love it. I've never heard anybody say that before. I love it.
I was brought up on English humor. My hero has always been Spike Milligan. That explains a lot of my.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, and I faced my own death too many times to take too much too seriously. But to kick the second segment off, I'd just like to share with you my mission. And my mission, I'm on a mission to eradicate suicide. Every 40 seconds, somebody dies because of depression, and they do not have to. And I'm living proof of that. And so that's what drives me. That's my passion. I've even quit singing and touring musically. I'm just into writing, and I've got some books out. But I would rather say, I thought, yeah, write a book, publish it, that's it, it's all over, Red Rover, you know, and just wait for the money to roll in. But for me, I would rather, I'm not here for the money, I would rather reach larger audiences with my message. That there is no such thing as mental illness. Depression is just a spiritual wake-up call. From my own life's journey, I spent 20 years trying to think my way out, but the only way I actually found to get out of depression was to turn my mind off and listen to my heart and heal the wounds of my childhood, because every traumatic event, they say, gets smothered by your subconscious, so you don't have to live it. But for me, my realization that was every wound I got became a body memory. My issues were in my issues. And so just by losing control, losing the plot, and letting my body do what it wanted to do, which I did on the boat, by vomiting out all those trapped emotions, that was my true healing. Feelings are healings. It was so simple. So, and if you can tell me how to get on a TEDx talk, that'd be great. Or how to get my books to rank at #1. But for me, there's two houses you can live in. There's Headspace or Heartspace.
Yeah,
and I love living in Heartspace because life is so simple. But anyway, that's my mission. And so take the floor. I'd like to hear your mission, and also more about your movement and whatever's in your heart, Marie. You know, this is
my mission truly is, Bob, to just thank you. My mission is to show people that there is a different way of dealing with grief, and not just what society suggests, which is you're falling apart and your life's not ever going to be the same, you know. And this is where it comes back to language, you know. What people always say, my life's never going to be the same. And when they say that, it's usually with a lot of negativity and heaviness. And I look at that and I go like, yeah, absolutely. Of course not. Of course your life's not going to be the same. What do you think, you know? And I don't mean that in a sort of standoffish kind of way at all. This is really coming from a space of my heart. Your life is never going to be the same. Yet what that means is really up to you, because everything in our lives has got the meaning that we give it. And society has given meaning to grief. That means your life is over and your life's, you know, horrible and sad and heavy. But what meaning I gave to grief was very, very different. You know, for me, that was a fork in the road, a massive fork in the road. Don't get me wrong, you know, like our life has really completely changed after Rob, but what we made of it was very different to what people expected. And there is so much love and happiness now in our lives. I really feel, in particular this week, there were a couple of things that happened where I thought, wow, I really got this. And that, although about a month ago, I went back into therapy because so many things came up in terms of parenting. Both my boys are teenagers now, or turning into teenagers now. One of them is turning 13 in January, so he's not officially a teenager yet, but his behavior proves that he already is. And there is this whole, how do you deal with that as a sole parent? And in particular, I'm the mom. I'm not the father figure, what probably grown boys need the most at that age. So how do I do this? And there were a lot of anxiety moments for me, and I never had to deal with anxiety in my life. I never knew what that actually felt like. And there were a lot of moments where I felt, am I giving them enough? Am I giving them what they need? Am I supporting them enough? Have I supported them enough in their healing? All these questions came up, and I decided that it was time for me to go back to therapy and actually look at that. And the most beautiful part was that I was so lucky to find the perfect therapist straight away, because that's often the tricky part, to find a really good one. And then you have to work through a couple that maybe not work or whatever, or don't align with you, let me put it that way. But this one was just picture perfect. And I'm so grateful that I found her, beautiful Michelle. And I sat there with her, and in the very first session, everything came out, the childhood, everything. And I was like, oh my goodness, here we go again, But this time it was not the here we go again. It was the, wow, I can look at things from such a different angle now, from a wanting to learn, wanting to heal, wanting to understand, wanting to form the connections so that I could break the circle for my boys and they didn't have to take that on. And here am I, every session, I'm actually having goosebumps saying that. Whoa. Here am I, in every session with Michelle, I'm sitting there and I'm starting to understand the connections. Where am I breaking the circle? Where are the patterns that I now still live and have taking on? And as soon as I notice them, I'm like, oh, here's another thing to let go of. This is amazing, and I love the work that I do with her, because in the very first session, she said to me, so I can obviously see, like, let's state the obvious. You are a coach, I'm a therapist, how would you like to work this? And I said, look, there's two different kind of coaches, where some of them come in with the I know, and, it becomes this, what do you know, what do I know sort of battle, I almost want to say. And others sit there, and because of the work they know, they are complete. I said, my heart and my mind is wide open for what you have got, because I need the outside perspective. That's what you are for me. The reflection, the pointing out things that I can't see because I'm way too close. I'm relying on you to hold up the mirror and go like, this is what you need to look at, Marie. And because of my background, I'm not standing here with the I know, because the I know blocks all the learning, blocks all the healing, blocks everything. There's no growth after I know. That's a full stop, and that's where the story ends. But when you meet each session, each lesson, each learning with curiosity, and with gratitude, and with your mind and heart wide open, that's where the healing happens. That's where the growth happens. And that's how I feel when a coach works with a therapist and the coach is really, really open to it. It becomes a fast forward session every single time. And that's exactly what happens. Every single time I walk out going like, whoa, that was another 10 weeks of therapy in one go,
Yeah.
So I'm loving the journey. I'm loving it. And it has brought so much gratitude, understanding, growth, and healing to me already.
Yeah, I'd love to respond to your word anxiety.
Yeah.
For me, as a stage performer, every time I go in the green room, I get butterflies in the tummy.
Yeah.
And I'm shaking and say, oh, I don't want to go out there, don't want to go out there. But luckily, very early on, I realized that this form of anxiety was actually my body raising its vibrational level so that I could go on stage and do the magic. So
amazing, isn't it?
That's one thing. But the anxiety I experienced in my adult life, like there's somebody behind me with a knife and there isn't, I traced that back to my family of origin, because as a child, I never knew when I was going to be hit. So my dysfunctional way of living was I was living in fight or flight. I was always anxious. So with that realization allowed me to just let it go. That was just, and you know, and I, being a wonderful child, I was not responsible for the way I was treated. So there's so many similarities. Yeah. And what I love, it took me a while to silence my mind, and now I treat my mind like I treat my little puppy dog. Like, when, you know, it needs exercise. My mind.
You let your mind jump around on a king size bed?
No, I don't let it do anything. I tell it what to do. So because I'm a good parent of my mind, and I know it needs exercise, I say to it, okay, mind, you go off and do some research into sonoluminescence and come back and report to me. So off it goes, wagging its little tail, because it's had some attention from the master. And it comes back to me, reports, and I've had it on the head and said, well done, mind. Here's a treat. Now back in your basket. I'll take you for another run tomorrow. And so that's how I treat my mind. And now I've got total clarity, total clear access to what my heart is telling me. And it's like in the silence of my heart, I found a place I call my knowing. And my knowing has no words. It's a feeling. It's my connection to God or source. It's how I connect to the Akashic record, but also it's a feeling of indestructibility. You know, I feel as if I'm made of titanium in that place. And all of this.
It's a feeling of safe.
Yeah. You know,
amazing. Beautiful.
I'm indestructible. But it was only by silencing the mind. For me, my heart is my only compass, and my inner tuition is my only guide. So that's where I'm at the moment. And I'm loving meeting more people like you that live in Heartspace and are sharing the truth. I reckon the universe operates under the KISS principle. Keep it simple, sovereign. The only time my life gets complicated is if I've let my mind get back in the driving seat. So I just grab a little bugger by the scruff of its neck, throw it in the boot, put my heart back in the driving seat, and life is simple again. Okay, that's my little rant for now. So carry on.
Where to from here?
You can talk about your movement or whatever you feel like.
I would love to share a little bit about the movement, because the movement was actually created from a space of not finding what I needed. And I really needed somebody to understand where I was coming from. I needed to be held in love and be told that things are perfect the way they are and where I'm going is the right way. And everywhere I looked, every grief group that I joined briefly and then left again in a rush, had comparison battles at its finest. I actually use that term in my TEDx talk as well. It's the whole, whose loss is more tragic, whose husband was younger, who had more kids or younger kids, or whose kids weren't even born yet, or who never had the chance to have children. There was this whole comparing losses, and comparison doesn't help you heal. It actually completely undermines what the person has just shared, which does the complete polar opposite of what the person needs. When somebody shares, it's like the talking stick principle. When somebody shares, they want to be held in love. They need somebody to hold space for them to share their story. They need to be seen. Their feelings need to be validated.
Yeah.
Yet my thing was that I wanted to give all of that and make sure that they don't stay in that feeling. The feeling is not there to reside there and stay in that pain. You feel it and then find your way out of there, because the feeling it is also showing you, well, do you want that pain forever in your life? No. All we want is love, is happiness. Everybody wants that. No matter what your background, no matter what you're telling me about your life, everybody wants love and happiness and joy in life. That's what we all have together in common, I mean. And I wanted to create a movement where that is possible. Hence the title was so perfect, you know, the loving life after loss. A lot of people look at it as like, oh, you're living life after loss. No, living isn't enough. I want that loving life space. You know, I really want to up it a level. I want people to realize that this is possible. It is possible. And in every grief group I go to, I see messages like, grief will stay with you forever. You can't ever heal that. Well, says who? That's absolute BS.
Bullshit.
That's your belief system. No belief system. That's what people have taught you, you know, as the truth in grief, that it will always stay with you. I don't treat grief like a permanent residence. I don't want that to live with me forever. I treat it like a visitor. It does come every now and then and knock on the door, no questions asked. There are triggers, and sometimes that's milestones like Christmas or Father's Day, and other times it's just a song that plays on the radio, and all of a sudden the floodgates open, and then, you know, the sunshine comes out and the rainbows and everything's beautiful again. And this is how I treat grief. I do allow it in when it comes, but it doesn't live here.
Yeah.
It's not a permanent residence in my house. Absolutely not. Joy and love, they are permanent residents. They can stay here forever. And every now and then grief comes in and, you know, soils it a little bit. And that's okay. That's absolutely okay. It's welcome. It's welcome to bring us, you know, reminders. And also it is often a highlighter of how far, I just got the thumbs up. I love it. A highlighter of how far we've come, you know, in our journey of healing it. And I love to look at it that way. I will never ever treat grief like a, you know, an elephant that I carry on my back for the rest of my life. I don't. I left that there the day Rob passed, and I'm like, you can walk with me for a little bit. You know, there's a beautiful, beautiful thing with elephants, but that's a whole other story. Here I'm going to show you my picture of the elephant walking with me. Had a beautiful, beautiful vision of an elephant coming to me. So anyway, I'm not going to digress any further, but this is how I treat grief, and I needed something that offers something different.
Can I respond? Yeah.
You?
For me, again, keeping it simple, for me, feelings are healings. And I wasn't allowed feelings as a child. So during my adult life, if someone pissed me off, I'd just put it in the pressure cooker until somebody would say something slightly innocuous, and I would explode like Krakatoa, and they get 2 years of suppressed crap dumped on them. So what's working for me now is a feeling will come in and I express it in the moment when it's appropriate. And what I love about the talking stick is, for me, I do not come here expecting agreement for all our unique. I simply expect acceptance and validation of my own reality. And so many people are stuck in hearing with the mind instead of listening with the heart. And there's, you know, one is Headspace and the other one is Heartspace. And that's why it's keep it simple, sovereign, because, you know, we don't, they talk about depression as being a life sentence. It's not. It's a spiritual wake-up call, you know. And we've been, and I don't like speaking for the we, because, you know, I can only speak for myself, but I think it's pretty safe enough to say that we in Western society have been programmed since about 1880 to believe that somebody out there has my answers, like psychiatrists and psychologists, and my experience of those those people is psychiatrists will give you a drug to numb the pain of your feelings, and then psychologists can provide you with coping skills to live with the pain of those feelings. But in hindsight, it was the power of those feelings that I had when I had my first panic attack that so frightened me that I went into the Western medical model and started my association and addiction to antidepressants. But looking back now, I realize, my real eyes, that the power of the feelings that I was having at that moment was simply the measure of how powerful I truly am as a being.
Yeah.
And that's why men, 75% of all suicides are men, because for decades now, they've been taught not to share their feelings.
Have feelings.
Yeah. And that's my message, and that's why I'm heavily involved in men's groups and stuff. And yeah. Oh God, this is such a beautiful conversation, Marie. Have you noticed when I look around the world at other people that get it, that get life, they glow, don't they?
Yeah.
Look at Wayne. Look at Wayne Dyer.
Oh God, yeah.
It was a classic example, and I see that now, and I realise that as a counsellor, I'm not here to wake anybody up. I don't have your answers. Finding your answers is your job. I realise that the best thing that I can do that keeps ego totally out of the picture, all I can do is let my own light shine. And like moths, it attracts people in the moment synchronistically, and they ask questions like, Bob, why are you always so, and then I share my story and they walk away a little bit lifted, a little bit lighter. And I think that's what we're here to do, just to let our own light shine. Yeah. And you are a very bright light. Yeah. And so is,
thank you, Bob.
And so is Rob. Yeah, this has been a really
absolutely
a heart-rending and heart-reaching conversation for me. But the other thing I realized is sometimes I'm happy, sometimes I'm sad, but I'm always content. Like if I was happy all the time, how would I know? But it's that inner contentment, that inner calm, that inner peace, that inner connection to source. The other thing I've learned is the universe has got a wicked sense of humor, which is probably why the universe and I get on so well. You got to watch out, because 100 times a day I'll just look up to the right, wink, and say, "Good on you, mate." When something nice has happened, or something's gone a bit purple, I'll look up and say, "All right, you bastard." I get it. I get the message. I need to look at this.
And the thing is, if you don't get it, it comes back anyway. So it comes circling back till you get the message. I love it.
That's what I found. I've realised that my body is so much smarter than me. It always knows what it needs, and all I have to do is listen and obey. So now my life is really simple. When my body's tired, we sleep, and when my body's awake, we play. End of story. There is only one law: do no harm, and I've only got one right, and that is the right of self-determination. That is now how simple my life is. And it's nice.
I love it. It's all about simplifying.
Yeah.
I agree.
Is there anything more you'd like to say, Maria?
I just got a thumbs up again. I love it. No, I think I've pretty much shared where I'm at, what happened, where I'm heading. So I love it.
Yeah, it feels natural now to close this wonderful and uplifting conversation. And you are welcome. You and Rob are welcome around my campfire anytime.
Thank you so much.
So to all the people that are listening, if you really enjoyed this conversation, please share it widely. And if you didn't, well, keep your bloody mouth shut. Bye for now. Love you. Bye.
Thank you so much, Bob. Thanks for having me. Bye.
You're welcome. Oh, that was great.